Ethnicity and deviant subcultures. Subcultures are formed amongst youth, arguably in an attempt to find social solidarity and a feeling of sharing a set of norms and values with respected peers. For example, the Teddy Boys and girls of the 70s who used flamboyant and recognisable styles with confrontational attitudes to form their spectacular subculture.
She's your fine looking, man. She's something else.
Here you've got the bright yellow and the pink and the orange.
Well, it's a reaction because a lot of ordinary people wear sort of modern clothes. We think, well, look, we're going to be different from everyone else. We're going to wear something different. Why should we dress like everyone else? We want to be individualists, as you might put it, sort of thing.
However, deviance, the idea of going against the norms and values of society, can then occur within these subcultures, and this is fueled primarily by the media, creating, as Cohen called it, moral panic. Hebditch said that youth subcultures like Teddy Boys and mods were imitations of styles from Italians and West Indians, so therefore youth subcultures can be read as a succession of black presence in Britain. The statistical picture on the relationship between ethnicity and crime or deviance is not all clear and is open to interpretation.
Last night when I was in the house, I heard a shot and they put a man by a car and he was dead, and the cops came this morning and he was on the floor. And he had one shoe on his feet, only one shoe, and they robbed his money.
Police, yeah? Put your hands out there.
For example, in 2006
to
7, 60% of whites were found guilty compared with 52% of blacks and 44% of Asians. Why this might be is a matter of interpretation. One possibility is that people from ethnic minority groups are more likely to be wrongly charged and accused, perhaps due to racial stereotyping. One functionalist point of view would be Merton and his strain theory. Merton's 1938 theory can clearly apply to members of some minority ethnic groups who statistically perform less well at school and therefore may be denied social mobility by legitimate means. Innovation or seeking new ways of achieving goals, including crime, is statistically seen through young ethnic minorities, thus resulting in ritualism, retreatism and ultimately anarchy. Karl Nightingale called this the paradox of inclusion, the desire to be included and the desire for success, designer labels and the American lifestyle, and yet to achieve this, for those suffering from poverty and racism, means deviance and criminal behaviour which ensure exclusion in society. Nightingale carried out a study of young black males in Philadelphia during 1993, which he documented in his book On the Edge, A History of Poor Black Children and the American Dreams. He argued that they consume the mainstream US culture through the media, like everyone else, sharing values like consumerism and money. However, they were excluded both radically and economically from fully participating in the mainstream means of achieving society's goals, thus turning to illegitimate means such as violence and crime to achieve these goals. We could link this to Cohen's idea of status frustration, which leads to attempts to gain status amongst peers by overturning values, also leading to crime. While most of the theories refer to working class boys, it is clear that in many towns and cities, the boys in question are often from ethnic minority groups. A Marxist point of view can be seen through the studies of Stuart Hall in 1978. Hall suggested that the resulting unemployment during a crisis of capitalism or economic recession had a disproportionate impact on black people, and therefore there was potential criminal activity, as they accepted the informal economy rather than to do the white man's shit work. A moral panic about street crime by black people was fostered, leading to a crackdown by the police and a crime wave fantasy that was unsurprisingly exaggerated by the media. An interactionist point of view can be seen through the studies of Edwin Sutherland in 1939. Sutherland used his ideology of differential association to suggest that people learn deviant values through their interactions, and therefore people brought up in or living in areas with high levels of crime might themselves become criminal. This could happen in predominantly ethnic minority areas like estates in London. Another interactionist sociologist is Chickerell, and he carried out observations in 1968 with the police and criminal justice services in 2 US cities. Stage 1. The police stop, interrogate and search an individual based on their interpretations of behaviour as suspicious or unusual, or the stereotype of a typical criminal. Stage 2. The police arrest the individual. This may depend on the suspect's appearance and manner and the replies the suspect gives to the police. Stage 3, probation officer. He or she has a picture of a typical delinquent and assesses the suspect to see if they fit the profile. These stages are very commonly perpetrated in areas of high crime, which tend to inhabit ethnic minorities. Becker's idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy can also be linked in here, with the idea of black youths accepting their stereotypes after powerful labels from agencies like the police categorise them into their idea of a typical criminal. Right realists or the new right argue, under Murray's strong influence, that the underclass don't want to work and see dependency on welfare as a positive lifestyle choice. So therefore, the entire underclass could be seen as deviant subcultures. Statistically, African Caribbean families are more likely to be matrifocal lone parent families. So Murray thinks that Britain will be affected through unsocialised youth, particularly from ethnic minorities. Left realist Lee and Young carried out their 1993 study, finding 3 main explanations for crime deviance in youth, with structural inequalities in society like poverty causing them. Relative deprivation is, for a variety of reasons, aimed towards members of some ethnic minority groups who are more likely to be working class or have a low income. The feeling of frustration when comparing themselves to others through a consumer culture, with media being a key source of information about what everyone has, further fuels crime as people want what they can't achieve. This then leads to marginalisation, the idea of people feeling pushed to the edges of society, excluded and powerless, with a lack of organised means to voice their frustrations, thus resulting to youth forming particular subcultures to help them deal with their feelings of frustration and blocked opportunities, so developing lives with deviant norms and values. This can also be a result of racial discrimination for many. Philip Bourgeois is a public anthropologist and had similar findings to Nightingale upon studying Latino and African American drug dealers in New York, El Barrio area, in 1995. Bourgeois discussed the anguish of growing up poor in the richest city in the world, arguing that this creates inner-city street culture where deviance becomes the norm. Much like Merton's innovators, the youths were highly ambitious and motivated. Despite the complex yet structured society they were growing up in, drug dealing was their way of surviving and achieving respect. Bourgeois saw it as understandable when the youth studied said, "Why should we take the subway to work a minimum wage job in the city when $1 million industry, drug dealing, is on our doorstep?" In conclusion, deviant subcultures are prevalent worldwide and their activities are exaggerated through the media. Ethnic youth subcultures are found primarily in socio-economically deprived areas and therefore are more of a target for social agencies.